Today, let's talk about how you go about writing a narrative descriptive essay. It's narrative because it's storytelling, and it's descriptive because you work very hard to place the reader there so that the reader hears, sees, feels, smells, and tastes exactly what you did during this event. You need to first pick an appropriate topic. That would be a topic that would be interesting to a reader other than yourself, because you're going to ask him to spend his time listening to your experience, and he should have some important takeaway because he's done that. You want a topic that lends itself to description because it can be developed with many sensory details that will allow the reader to put himself there. Details like sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and movements that you noticed. And finally, you've chosen a topic that is narrow enough to be fully developed in just a few paragraphs. For example, your experiences in the Iraq War is way too broad a topic. You couldn't possibly do justice to everything that happened to you in just a few paragraphs. You would want to narrow it down to just one encounter that you had, maybe with just one other soldier, that most characterized the kinds of experiences that you had when you were serving. Narrowing the topic before you begin to write is critically important. So let's look at what might happen with one topic. The topic you may have when you begin is a car wreck that you were in, but you need to narrow that down. Let's make it more specific. How about the wreck when your Honda was hit by a Jeep Cherokee? That's getting closer, but we could narrow it again and again. Try the instant of impact between my Honda and the Jeep Cherokee. And you might even narrow it further to what happened to your daughter at the instant of impact between your Honda and a Jeep Cherokee. So, what happened to your daughter at the instant of impact between the Honda and a Jeep Cherokee is your topic. It's what your sentence or what your essay is about. Now we need to think about what will be the point that you're making in this essay. We're developing your thesis statement. So you ask yourself, what changed in me when I had the experience of the instant of the impact between my Honda and a Jeep Cherokee? What did I learn? What was memorable? What was my takeaway from that experience? So let's say you narrowed your thesis down to something like, at the instant of impact between my Honda and a Jeep Cherokee, I learned the true fragility of a child's life. Now what you need to do is outline the story, keeping in mind that all stories have a beginning and a middle and an end. So you outline your essay around these three parts. Think of it almost as three scenes that get you from the beginning to the most exciting piece and finally to the end where everything is resolved. Plan to choose some descriptive images for each part of your story. What do you remember seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling right at the beginning of this event? For example, maybe it was raining hard and you'd been driving for hours and your eyes were so tired they were bone dry, even though it was soggy outside. Maybe you remember that your daughter was snoring in the seat beside you. Then select descriptive images for the middle. What exactly at the middle of the thing? What happened that may create, well, they call it the rising complication. What did you feel, hear, see, smell, or touch, or taste? What movements took place as the thing escalates, as it becomes more dramatic? And finally, you want to make note of the descriptive images that you have for the conclusion or the very end of your essay. Now, on a piece of scrap paper, you should write your statement of your purpose in telling this story. You may not come out and state it directly in the essay, but you need to know why you're telling the story in order to choose the details that you will write about. And if you write your statement of purpose down, it will keep you on track. For example, and the essay we're not going to write, but we're pretending that we will write, we will say that my purpose is to convince the reader of the fragility of my daughter's body and probably therefore of his own children. Writing the introduction or the introductory paragraph is an important part of the essay. For one thing, because you've got your reader temporarily attending to what you have to say. But he may still need to change the oil in his car, or take his kids to a soccer game, or watch the end of the football game he really wants to see. So you have to do something in the very beginning to grab the reader's attention. If my paper were to start out something like, in this paper I will tell you blah, 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 would your reader stay? Probably not. He'd probably put it down and say, I'll get back to this later, if he's determined to read it, and he may not get back to it at all. On the other hand, if you've written a real grabber beginning to catch the reader's attention, if you grab him by the throat and keep him with you, you're more likely to retain him long enough to be able to finish your essay. For example, put your reader right in the middle of the action just as you begin. That's a grabber beginning if it's an action story. For example, I hit the brakes, expecting to hear the shriek and squeal of the tires, but there was an ominous silence, interrupted only by the sleepy noises coming from my 3-year-old, who was unaware she was facing death. Silently, the car was hydroplaning on the puddles on the pavement. As we hurtled towards the bridge abutment, I knew we were about to die. That grabs your attention. You're less likely to want to put it down because you want to know what happens next. So don't talk about your paper in your paper. Just plunk your reader right down in the middle of the story. And in the introductory paragraph, find a way to tell the reader smoothly your purpose in telling the story so that he'll know what he's going to take away, or what he will learn, or how he will be changed just by reading this story. Now you need to write the body of the essay, the main part, start to finish, of what happened. In the body, tell your complete story, the story that accomplishes your purpose. And I stress that again because the details that you select will be determined by what you're trying to accomplish. You need very, very specific and very concrete details, but you also need to be ruthless in leaving out any details that don't advance your story, the reason that you're telling it now. It is a story, so chronological order makes sense. First this, then this, then this, then this happened. And depending on the scope of your story, your chronology may go instant by instant, as was happening in the one that I was pretend writing there. And in others, if the event took longer to experience, it might go minute by minute or week by week. It's important in the beginning to take a few lines to set the scene of the story. Who are you? Where are you? Why are you on the road? Just enough detail to let the reader know where this is all happening and when. You want to use highly descriptive language. Again, paint a picture for the reader so she feels she is part of this story. That will carry her interest along if she feels that she is there. You also want to use description to set the scene. Describe a few people or some events or other things as they come up in the story in detail so that you keep your picture in color rather than just in black and white. For example, if this happens, a woman advances to the podium, you would say something like, probably better than this, a wobbly elderly woman in a long crocheted shawl crept up to the podium. We've got 2 words that show movement, wobbly and crept, and we've got a visual image of somebody that's really old in a long crocheted shawl, and we anchor the whole thing by explaining that she's coming up to the podium, maybe to make a speech or something like that. Now, when we say use the language of the senses, that means the sights, the sounds, the smells, the taste, the touch, the movements. You say you heard a cry? Exactly what kind of a cry was it? You need to stretch for the correct word and use a thesaurus if you need to. Was that cry a shriek, a bawl, a moan, a blubber, a yelp, a wail, a sob, a keen, a whimper, a bellow? Each of these words have a connotation implying something distinctly different. So labor over the words that you choose and it will make your essay much more effective. And we come back again to that you have to write selectively. Choose your details selectively. Your descriptions will be full of sensory details, but lots of sensations are happening at the most important moment in your story. But you choose only those that move your story along. If you heard a cow moo in the instant your Honda collided with that Jeep, would that detail help move your story along? Probably not. It would probably only be a distraction, so leave the cow out. As you write the end of your essay, the climax part, be aware that it should be the most vivid part of the essay. The climax is the place that is the most suspenseful. Will the child live or die? Will the defendant be found guilty? Those kinds of things. It's the place where there's the most tension and where in a very short time that tension will be resolved and the results will be revealed. So you want to write it if you can so that everything comes together or is resolved in an instant. Suddenly I realized, or out of nowhere came the thought, or my child's limp body twitched and I knew, or one shot was fired and the eagle crumpled. Those would be examples of sentences that might bring the climax to an essay, to the story in an essay. And then the time comes for you to write a conclusion, a concluding paragraph. You want to think first about your purpose, what it was that you set about to accomplish, and about what you want your reader to take away from your story. So you sum up the story and you remind the reader why you told it, what it should communicate to him. If you have a parting word, say it. If not, you may just try paraphrasing the statement of that purpose with that in mind. And so you've reached the end of your essay, but you haven't really reached the end of your work because there's one more step that you need to go through. No, you're not finished yet because you still have to proofread your essay. And to do that, in order to make the essay as polished as you can, you don't want to get caught up in telling your story again. You don't want to get involved in the suspense. So to avoid doing that and to be able to focus on stuff like sentence structure, errors in spelling, punctuation, and the like, you proofread backwards, sentence by sentence, focusing only on the errors that you see, not focusing on the ideas. And finally, you read it aloud again forward, listening for smooth transitions, ease in following the descriptions. Add transitional phrases or sentences where needed. And finally, read it aloud to someone else. You will be amazed at the errors that you hear that you did not see before. And when you've got all of those fixed, then you really are at the end.